If confirmed, you're going to inherit a region that has been transformed in remarkable ways in the recent years, most significantly by the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords were historic peace agreements, the first in decades achieved in the region. They were achieved, I believe, because the prior administration abandoned the longstanding U.S. policy of deliberate ambiguity between Israel and the Palestinians, and rather pursued a policy that America unequivocally stands with our friend and ally, the nation of Israel. That clarity produced the Abraham Accords, I believe. That clarity was manifested in multiple ways, including moving our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, including withdrawing from the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal. The Biden administration seems bound and determined to unwind all of the positive progress made in the Middle East, to run away from the peace deal, to embrace the strategic ambiguity that for decades failed, and the Biden administration seems to want to go back to that failure. When it comes to the Abraham Accords, the Biden administration, frankly, has been almost comical, going so far as quite literally putting out a guidance at the U.S. State Department not to utter the words Abraham Accords. In writing, officials in the Biden State Department saying, we don't use those words here. Instead, they are to be referred to as normalization agreements. And I will say that was not simply a written guidance, but sadly, it's a guidance that seems to be followed. Just yesterday, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, gave a speech on the anniversary of the Abraham Accords in which she refused to utter the words Abraham Accords. The entire thing seems like a Monty Python skit. I understand that the Biden administration is not a fan of Donald Trump. But throwing away historic Middle East peace agreements because the administration doesn't like their predecessor is extraordinarily foolish. It is harmful to the United States, and it is harmful to our friends and allies. Can you tell this committee, in your judgment, what is the importance of the Abraham Accords? And should they be maintained and strengthened, or should they be undermined and weakened?
Senator, I agree with you. Those are historic accords. The Abraham Accords changed and brought a new dynamic to a region that has really had very little in the way of good news in recent years. There's no question in my mind that they have already contributed and will contribute still more to peaceful coexistence and to economic integration. And that last piece has been very much missing across this region. So I can assure you that if confirmed, I will make it a top priority, not just to help foster the deepening of the roots of those relationships, and they each of them have different dynamics according to their own societies and cultures, but I will work with those governments and with the Israeli government to strengthen and deepen those accords, and then widen the circle. Absolutely. There are more opportunities out there. They're not quite as in a state of readiness, perhaps, as the UAE was, but there are prospects there. They start with some very significant moves on people-to-people contacts, and that's one of the things that I really, I think, was most striking in the case of the UAE and Bahrain. Those governments had began a very subtle process of beginning to warm their public up to the idea. And that's the sort of thing that, frankly, the U.S. has to push on with other governments, and I'm ready to do it.